Hello, and welcome to this special spooky customization video. Today I will be making a Kelpie-inspired horse. Kelpies are in Scottish and Irish folklore and are one of my favorite mythical creatures. It is said that if someone climbs onto their backs, they cannot get off and are drowned and eaten. I want to reflect this gruesome tale by making mine have a skull head and exposed ribs. To start, I will be using this artist resin by Julie Brooks called Twister. The sculpt depicts snaking that wild mustangs do. Initially, I planned to make him a mustang, but the cast was a bit rough, and why deal with all that when I can just cover it all with seaweed? I wanted to make a Kelpie anyway, so I decided he would be a perfect fit given the neck position. First up, I draw a concept. Definitely an important step, especially with a complex design. Since Kelpies live in bodies of water, I definitely want lots of kelp and generally nasty swamp energy. So first up, his head has to go. Don't worry, I have a plan for that too. I used this jewelry saw, and the resin was surprisingly easy to cut through. I 3D printed this skull with a resin printer. You can find similar ones online, just make sure they're to scale. This one is 1/9, like most traditional models. I will link the file I used below, though I did have to resize it. I will be using some lights, so I drill a hole in the neck so I can wire them through from the body. I have to line it up carefully so it doesn't go through the side of the neck. I also want him to have light up ribs, so I draw them on using reference to make sure that they are the correct position and the right amount. Then I can use my Dremel with a pointed bit to carve them out. It's important to note that this would be a lot harder with a briar or other plastic model since it would gum up the bit. The resin makes it pretty easy, I just have to make sure to wear eye protection and a respirator because of all the dust. My hand was starting to wear off all the pencil, so I lightly mark all the outlines with my Dremel. Using a pen probably would have been the smart move there. Once that's done, I clean it out with compressed air. The battery for the lights will be hidden in the body, so I cut out a triangle the size of the width of the pack. I poke it out with a screwdriver. I'm using an LED fairy light strip. You can get them in pretty much any color. I got the kind with coin batteries since they have a smaller pack. I need to thread it through the neck so that the end will be the eyes. I poke through some random twist tie and wrap it around the lights to pull it through. Next, I test it to make sure this actually works and is looking okay. Looking pretty cool. For the spine, I drilled some holes in off camera. They would be way too fragile with epoxy alone, so I put in some wire supports with my E6000 glue. They kept wanting to slide through into the body, but luckily I could fish them out through the battery hole. I temporarily hot glue them into place until the strong glue can dry. Once that happened, I pried off the hot glue and now I can sculpt the spine. I'm using Aves 2-part epoxy and smoothing with 70% rubbing alcohol. To make crisp edges, I use an Xacto knife. While I wait for that to harden, I can work on the skull. The jaw is a little thin here, so I build it up for strength. I want him to have some scary teeth, so I rolled tiny pointed pieces and placed them over the original teeth. I try and put them on pretty low so they won't break as easily. Once they had hardened, I position the jaw how I want and add temporary hot glue to hold it while I place the epoxy. With that set overnight, I can remove the hot glue with some wire cutters. I want to make him a tongue, so I build up some epoxy on a wire. I attach the wire that will connect it to the neck. I prime it off camera since it will be harder once the lights are in. I go ahead and paint it black as well. I'm using some Liquitex acrylic paint. Now for the fun part, the eyes. I put the end 2 LEDs in the eye sockets. Luckily the lights work as long as the wire is intact, so I can sculpt over it. I hot glue the wire into place after getting the position right. I turn on the light to make sure I don't accidentally bend it too much or something, and because it looks cool. The light will also shine through the mouth, so I bunch up lights there and glue them into place. I build up the gap to seal it all in. I want some more feathering on the legs, so I build up the area with epoxy. It wasn't sticking to the resin super well, even though I sanded it first, so I really had to mash the first layer down. Once I had a nice sticky base, I could add the hairs by rolling noodles and bending them in half. I blended them upwards with my finger and some rubbing alcohol. Then I can use my silicone tools and knife to give it a hair flow and texture. Once I've got the legs nice and fluffy, I can start on the ears. I lay a wire down in the middle and let the epoxy harden it on. I bend them into a nice scary pinned back position and started to add the epoxy. I let the top harden before doing the underneath. As a side note, I usually work on multiple parts at a time since I have to wait for so much curing. For the transition from the skull to the neck, I want to make some muscle structures. I want some muscle over the cheek as well for some extra spookiness. To take a little break from sculpting, I will be making the belly covering for the battery pack. I take the triangle I cut out earlier and add some aluminum I cut from roof flashing. I sand it so it isn't sharp and adheres better. I used the epoxy to stick them on, but ended up pulling them off and using a 2-part glue for a stronger hold. I want to make 2 turnable tabs to hold the triangle piece on, so I make rounded ones that won't be sharp when I move them. I don't want them actually claiming any victims, even if they are just my fingers. I drill a small hole to give the screw a start. I got these off of a pair of old glasses. I hand turn it to give it a start, then use my drill. I don't want it completely tightened so it won't spin, but not too loose that it will move on its own. I repeat that for the other side. I fill in the bottom of the hole with some epoxy for a tighter fit, since the Dremel did remove some of the resin when I made the cuts. I added a string to the wire inside so it will pull out when the piece is removed. The paint underneath will rub off since it has moving parts, but it's not super noticeable. A worthwhile sacrifice in my opinion. Now it's time to start the seaweed. I want these creeping tendrils to come out onto the shoulders. I press the noodles down and use my knife to make the crisp pointed edges. I will be sculpting on a bridle. Kelpies do have a weakness. It's said that anyone who can get a hold of a Kelpie's bridle will command it. For the bit I use 2 small O-rings and twist thin wire connecting them. I attach that to a wire that will be the bridle's base and sculpt over it. I lay on the rest of the bridle's pieces with epoxy. For decoration, I sculpt on a small Celtic-inspired braid pattern. Next, I want to make the mane a little bit longer. I attached some wire supports beforehand that will make a good base. I use the same technique as the feathering, applying noodles, blending them, and sculpting the finer details. I try and keep the flow of the original mane sculpt. Now I can add the supports for the seaweed that will drape over the sides. He's looking really crazy now, but these plus some thicker wire will make sure our seaweed doesn't just snap off. I wrap them up for strength as well as to give the epoxy a hold so it doesn't slip off while I'm sculpting. I printed out some pictures of different types out of water so I can get a variety. It's similar to the main but less flowing and uniform. I like to take a noodle, flatten it with my palms, and twist it before applying it to give it a nice texture. And now I just repeat this process, making sure to layer different types. Here I'm adding texture before placing it on. I do both ways for more variety. I also went seaweed on his feet to give the feeling of him coming up out of the water, trailing them behind. I also put some wire supports in these. As an added bonus, they will help him stand. I also want his tail to be dragging along, so I extended the original one with some more wire and aluminum foil. I also added hot glue to help pat it out. I make sure to lay foil underneath so it won't stick to the table. Now that the hard part is done, it's time to prime! I made sure to sand before sculpting so it has tooth, and not just because of all those sharp teeth. I don't want any paint on the lights, so I made sure to tape up the body lights and add tape over the eyes. Now I can use my Duplicolor sandable primer, with a respirator of course. He will be white, but I don't want light coming through where I don't want it, so the dark color will help prevent that. Once that dries, I can airbrush the white base. I'm using some Model Air acrylic with some thinning medium. Now I build up the shading with a cream color. I seal that all in with Mr. Super Clear Matte Spray, and go in with my pastels for smaller details. I'm using this Urban Decay eyeshadow palette. I also make sure to seal that when I'm done. I know my original concept had a black skull, which is very cool, but I was afraid it would get lost with so much going on. So to help it stand out, I keep it white and have the eye sockets stay black. For the seaweed, I want them to be a dark marsh green, but I'll need to thin watered down layers so I don't lose detail. I want it even dark and muddier, so I mix up more red for the second coat. I add in the details with a light green and dry brush on some highlights. Once the paint is completely dry, I add a Liquitex gloss varnish to make it nice and wet looking. I want to shade the muscles red, so I go in with a short eyeshadow brush and some colourpop eyeshadow. I seal with matte spray in between layers to build up the color. I also use a little grey pan pastel for shading the skull. I sealed everything off camera with Testors spray lacquer. I want the bridle to be nice and shiny, so I paint it with some Testors silver enamel. Now to put in the flesh behind the ribs to make it extra creepy, as well as to hide the battery pack. You can see I've already done this side. I cut out a piece of felt a bit bigger than the rib cage. I roll it up and cram it inside. It kind of looks like ham. I use a stick and my finger to move it around inside until it's where I want it. It does take a lot of fiddling. Next I press it tight with my finger and glue it in place with super glue. This also makes it harder and less like fabric. Now I can turn it on and he has a nice fleshy glow. I added a removable chain off camera and we're all done! love how he turned out. He's definitely ready to lure some unsuspecting people to their watery demise. Thank you for watching this spooky customization video. I hope you learned something. I definitely recommend making a light up project. The effect is so worth it. I hope you have a good spooky season, and definitely make sure to stay away from strange horses standing in bodies of water. Make sure to boop that like button and subscribe for more projects.